I am Sienna, 34 years old. And for the last 7 years, my family told our entire community that I had tragically disappeared. The truth is, I simply stopped letting them drain my bank account. They spent years playing the grieving abandoned family while secretly enjoying the money they stole from me. Last Tuesday, they finally tracked me down to demand more cash. My brother knocked on my door, fully expecting to find a broken woman living in squalor. Instead, he looked past me, went completely pale, and backed down the steps with his phone to his ear. I had no idea that pressing one single button on my wall would trap him in a nightmare of his own making. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you have ever faced toxic family members who completely underestimated your worth. The confrontation began on a bright Tuesday morning. Marcus, my older brother, and the undisputed golden child of our family, stood on the pristine limestone porch of my expensive mansion in Buckhead, Atlanta. Beside him was his entitled white wife, Claire, clutching a designer handbag that I instantly recognized as a cheap counterfeit. They had spent $500 hiring a private investigator to find this address, fully expecting to find me renting a damp basement or living in a tiny servant quarters. When I opened the custom mahogany front door, I was wearing a silk lounger holding a cup of artisan coffee. Claire did not even wait for a greeting. She immediately scoffed, looking me up and down with absolute disdain. "Well, the security in this neighborhood is a complete joke," Claire sneered, her voice dripping with microaggressions. "Are you absolutely sure this is the right address, Marcus? She does not look like she belongs here. Sienna, whose house are you cleaning? We do not have time for games today, so wrap up your little housekeeping shift." I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warm liquid soothe my throat, and smiled at her. I did not correct her. I wanted them to dig their own graves. Marcus pushed past his wife, puffing out his chest to deliver his ultimate ultimatum. He completely ignored the towering crystal chandelier visible in the foyer behind me and the imported Italian marble floors. His mind was too narrow to comprehend that a black woman he had deemed a failure could own such luxury. "Listen to me, Sienna," Marcus commanded, using the exact same authoritative tone our father always used when making unreasonable demands. "I am not here to play catch-up. Mom and Dad are in serious financial trouble, and my investment firm needs immediate liquidity for a massive commercial expansion. Mom told me about that $50,000 college savings fund you bragged about years ago. We need you to wire it to my business account right now. We will consider it a family loan, but honestly, it is the least you can do after abandoning your sick parents for 7 years." The sheer audacity of his demand hung in the humid Georgia air. $50,000. That was the money I had saved by working 3 grueling jobs during my college years, surviving on instant noodles, and sleeping in my car when I could not afford rent. Back then, my mother had forbidden me from touching it, claiming it needed to be saved to fund an extravagant high-society wedding for Marcus and Claire. That was the final insult that caused me to walk away completely. "I am not a housekeeper, Claire," I said calmly, shifting my gaze to my brother. "And I do not have $50,000 for you to borrow, Marcus." Marcus's face twisted into a mask of pure rage. He hated being denied, especially by the sister he viewed as entirely subservient. He took an aggressive step toward the door, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. "Do not be a selfish child, Sienna," Marcus yelled, his voice echoing across the manicured lawn. "You know exactly how important family image is to us. I am building generational wealth for this family. You are a single, childless woman with no actual responsibilities. Do not make me call Mom to come down here and teach you a lesson in basic respect." "Please call her," I replied, my voice steady and cold. "But tell her to call for permission before she drives up here." I reached over to the security panel mounted on the wall beside the front door. Without breaking eye contact with my brother, I pressed the large red button. A heavy mechanical grinding sound echoed down the long driveway. Marcus and Claire whipped their heads around just in time to see the massive wrought iron estate gates slowly swinging shut, locking them firmly inside the property line. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. His eyes darted frantically around the property. He finally noticed the huge, sprawling 3-story architectural masterpiece behind me. He looked at the perfectly manicured acres of land. He saw the gleaming brand-new luxury cars parked in the open four-car garage. The truth crashed down on him, suffocating his arrogance. I was certainly not the maid. I was the true homeowner. All the color drained from Marcus's face. The aggressive, domineering golden child instantly vanished, replaced by a terrified man who had just realized he had walked into a trap. He stumbled backward down the limestone steps, nearly tripping over his own expensive leather shoes. His hands shook violently as he pulled his phone from his pocket and pressed it to his ear. "Mom," Marcus stammered into the receiver, his voice cracking with pure panic. "Mom, you really need to get over here right now. You need to see this. Sienna, she never told us. She is not broke, Mom. She actually owns the entire luxury estate." Marcus lowered his phone, his hands trembling as he stared at the impenetrable wrought iron gates that now sealed them inside my property. The heavy mechanical clank of the lock engaging echoed across the manicured lawn, finalizing their entrapment. While Marcus was paralyzed by the realization that his broke, discarded sister was actually a multi-millionaire, his wife Claire decided to employ a completely different survival tactic. Claire watched the color drain from her husband's face and realized her fabricated position of power was rapidly evaporating. Humiliated but absolutely desperate to maintain her perceived superiority, she immediately attempted to weaponize her tears. Her perfectly manicured hands flew to her face, and her voice pitched up into a frantic, fragile whine designed to make me look like a dangerous predator. "Marcus, do something!" Claire shrieked, pressing her back against a massive stone pillar, as if I were about to physically attack her. "She is trapping us here, Sienna. Why are you being so hostile right now? We just came here to have a polite family conversation, and you are acting completely aggressive. You are scaring me. Let us leave this place right now before I call the police on her." It was the classic predictable playbook. The moment an independent black woman sets a firm boundary, the entitled white woman immediately defaults to calling her aggressive and hostile. 10 years ago, those loaded racial microaggressions might have made me second-guess myself. Today, standing on the porch of the $8 million estate I bought with my own cash, they just made me laugh. "Save the helpless victim routine for someone who actually cares, Claire," I said, leaning casually against the custom doorframe. "Nobody is attacking you. You drove onto my private property uninvited, demanded my hard-earned money, and insulted my home. I am simply ensuring you stay right here until my mother arrives to witness this pathetic display." Claire's face flushed a deep, mottled red. Her fake tears instantly vanished, replaced by sheer defensive indignation. "You are just a bitter, jealous woman," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at me. "You think having a nice house makes you better than us? My husband is an investment banker. I own a luxury boutique. We wear clothes that cost more than your entire life savings. We have actual class." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, letting my eyes travel slowly up and down her outfit. My gaze stopped at her feet, and a genuine smile of amusement spread across my face. "Class is usually authentic, Claire," I replied, my voice cutting through the humid Georgia air like a finely sharpened blade. "For example, those red-bottom heels you are wearing right now are a terrible counterfeit. Christian Louboutin never released that specific shade of burgundy in a matte finish, and the stitching on the heel strap is completely uneven. Furthermore, the supposed limited edition Birkin bag you are clutching so desperately has a tarnished brass clasp. Hermes only uses gold or palladium hardware for that specific model. You walked onto my estate demanding $50,000 while wearing a clearance bin costume." Claire gasped, instinctively pulling the fake designer bag behind her back. The sudden, brutal dismantling of her fake luxury lifestyle left her completely speechless. She looked at Marcus silently, begging him to defend her shattered pride. Marcus finally snapped out of his panicked daze. Seeing his wife publicly humiliated pushed him into a blind defensive rage. He stomped his foot onto the limestone step, puffing out his chest to project an authority he absolutely did not possess. "Do not you dare speak to my wife like that!" Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. "You think you are so smart because you scammed your way into some money. I am a highly successful investment banker. I manage multi-million-dollar portfolios every single day. I am building true generational wealth for this family. while you sit around as a bitter, unmarried outcast. You have no husband, no children, and no actual legacy. You are just a lonely woman, living in a big, empty house. I did not raise my voice. I did not match his frantic energy. I simply stood there and let him yell until his face was dripping with sweat. He was desperately clinging to the golden child narrative our mother had carefully constructed for him since birth. He needed to believe he was the successful patriarch, the financial savior of the family, because confronting the truth would completely destroy him. I casually raised my left arm, pulling back the silk sleeve of my lounger to check the time on my solid rose gold Rolex. The sunlight caught the diamond bezel, sending scattered prisms of light dancing across the stone porch. The heavy watch was a recent gift to myself, purchased to celebrate my venture capital firm crossing the $100 million threshold in managed assets. "Are you quite finished, Marcus?" I asked smoothly, lowering my arm. "Because yelling is not going to change the balance of your bank accounts." "I am richer than you will ever be," he screamed, pointing furiously at my face. "My company is expanding across the entire East Coast. You are nothing compared to me. Our parents know you are a failure, and no amount of stolen wealth will ever change that fact." I let him scream. I let him boast about his imaginary wealth and fake corporate empire. The suspense building inside me was electric. I felt a thrilling, almost dangerous level of anticipation coursing through my veins. Marcus had absolutely no idea that I held a massive, devastating secret that was about to obliterate his entire facade. He did not know that my financial analysts had already pulled the audit reports on his fraudulent business. He did not know that I was fully aware of the catastrophic crypto losses he was desperately trying to hide from his oblivious wife. Most importantly, Marcus did not realize that by demanding $50,000 from me today, he had just handed me the match to burn his entire fake life to the ground. I took another calm sip of my coffee, listening to the distant sound of an approaching engine. Our mother was finally arriving, and the real show was about to begin. This was the exact moment I had waited for. Every single lie they had told to protect his ego was about to be exposed. The heavy tires of a silver Mercedes sedan screeched wildly against the smooth pavement of my circular driveway. The car came to an abrupt, jerky halt just inches from the central marble fountain. The driver's side door flew open and out stepped Brenda, the domineering matriarch of our family. She was dressed in her typical Sunday best, a tailored navy blue suit, and a wide-brimmed hat perfectly coordinated to project an image of absolute moral superiority to anyone watching. But there was no audience here to impress. There was only me, the daughter she had emotionally discarded, standing on the porch of an estate she could never afford. For 7 long years, I had maintained total radio silence. I had vanished from their lives, leaving them to spin whatever dramatic lies they wanted to the church congregation. A normal mother seeing her long-lost daughter alive, healthy and clearly thriving, would have dropped everything and run to embrace her. A normal mother would have cried tears of genuine relief. Brenda did not even offer me a single second of maternal warmth. She did not ask how I had survived where I had been, or if I was happy. Instead, she marched aggressively up the limestone steps, her sensible low heels clicking sharply against the stone, clutching a thick manila folder against her chest like a weapon. "What on earth is wrong with you, Sienna?" Brenda barked, barely pausing to catch her breath. She ignored the sprawling architectural magnificence surrounding her, deliberately refusing to acknowledge my success. "Your brother called me in an absolute panic. Why are you locking him behind these ridiculous gates? You have always been nothing but a petty, dramatic child. Clearly 7 years away has not matured you one bit. Open these gates immediately, and let us handle this family business like respectable adults." I did not move. I leaned against the doorframe, watching her perform the same toxic routine she had rehearsed for 3 decades. "Hello to you too, Mother," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of the fear she expected. "It is truly fascinating that your first instinct after 7 years is to scream at me on my own front porch." Brenda scoffed loudly, waving her hand in the air to dismiss my words. "Do not use that disrespectful tone with me. I am your mother, and you owe me the courtesy of obedience. I have had to sit in the front pew of Zion Baptist Church for 7 years, telling everyone that my daughter tragically lost her way and disappeared because she could not handle the pressures of the real world. You abandoned your sick father. You abandoned your family. And now, I find out you have been hiding away in this excessive, unnecessary house while your brother is out there grinding to build a legacy. She stepped closer, aggressively thrusting the manila folder toward my chest. I did not reach out to take it. The folder hit my silk lounger and fell onto the porch, scattering several legal documents across the stone. "Pick those up and sign them right now," Brenda commanded, pointing a stiff finger at the fallen papers. "Marcus is expanding his investment portfolio and he needs immediate capital to secure a massive commercial property. Your selfish little college fund is clearly not going to be enough to cover the down payment anymore. Since you obviously have no husband to manage your finances and no children to leave this excessive property to, you are going to sign the deed of this house over as collateral for your brother's business loan. It is the absolute least you can do to repay the debt you owe this family for raising you." I looked at the scattered papers, then back at the woman who spent my childhood treating me like a disposable asset. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of her demand was breathtaking. She genuinely believed that she could waltz onto my property, insult my existence, and bully me into signing over an $8 million estate just to prop up her golden son. "You want me to use my home as collateral for a loan Marcus cannot afford?" I asked, allowing a cool, mocking smile to touch my lips. "A man who spent 10 minutes screaming on my porch because he needs $50,000 in cash." "Marcus is a visionary," Brenda yelled, her face flushing with indignant rage. "He is securing the future of our bloodline. You have always tried to sabotage him because you are bitter. You were a selfish, difficult child from the day you were born. You ruined every single family portrait we ever took by refusing to smile, always trying to draw attention to your own miserable moods. I provided a roof over your head, and this is how you repay me, by hoarding wealth, while the son who actually respects me struggles." Claire, feeling emboldened by her mother-in-law's aggressive arrival, stepped out from behind Marcus. "Listen to her, Sienna," Claire whined, crossing her arms defensively. "We are family. Family helps family. You are being completely unreasonable. If you do not sign that collateral paperwork today, Marcus will miss out on the biggest commercial deal of his entire career. You are literally trying to ruin our lives because you are lonely." "The only thing ruining your lives is your own staggering incompetence," I replied smoothly. Brenda stepped directly into my personal space, her eyes narrowing into venomous slits. She tried to use her physical proximity to intimidate me, a tactic that used to make me shrink away in tears when I was a teenager. Today I stood my ground, looking down at her from my higher step. "I am not asking you, Sienna," Brenda hissed, her voice dropping into a low, threatening growl. "I am telling you, you are going to sign those papers right now. You will transfer the equity of this house to Marcus. If you refuse, I will truly destroy you." I reached down, picked up the scattered legal documents from the limestone floor, and stacked them neatly together. I gripped the thick stack of papers with both hands and ripped them straight down the middle, tossing the shredded halves into the pristine landscaping bushes. "I am not signing over my property," I stated. "Your golden son can figure out his own financial disasters." Brenda let out a breathless gasp, her face twisting into a mask of unadulterated fury. My blatant defiance completely broke her brain. "You wicked, arrogant little girl," Brenda shrieked. "You think you can turn your back on your own flesh and blood without severe consequences? I will make you deeply regret this day." "Sienna, what exactly are you going to do, Mother?" I challenged her, crossing my arms. "Yell at my security gates until you lose your voice." Brenda stepped forward, deploying the ultimate weapon in her shallow, status-obsessed life. "I am going to stand right in front of the entire congregation at Zion Baptist Church this coming Sunday," Brenda threatened frantically. "I will grab the microphone during the community announcements and publicly brand you as an ungrateful daughter. I will tell the entire community that you are a heartless monster who abandoned her severely sick father to die while you hoarded your millions in absolute luxury." Marcus nodded vigorously to show his support for our mother's vicious threat, and Claire smiled smugly. They fully expected me to beg for mercy to protect my reputation. Instead, that specific threat became the ultimate trigger. Mentioning my father and his illness was the absolute worst mistake Brenda could have possibly made. My detached amusement completely evaporated, replaced by a cold surgical focus. I stepped down one limestone step, closing the distance between my mother and me. "You are going to talk to the church congregation about my father and his illness?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave, razor-sharp and dangerously quiet. "Are you absolutely certain you want to open that specific door, Brenda?" "Do not you dare question me," Brenda yelled back, though her eyes darted nervously for a split second. "Everyone knows you vanished when his heart condition worsened. You are a complete disgrace to the family name." 7 years ago, I began, my voice cutting through the humid air with perfect clarity. I was working 3 grueling jobs. I was waiting tables from 5 in the morning until noon, answering customer service calls until 8 at night, and cleaning commercial office buildings until 2 in the morning. I slept in my cramped, freezing car for an entire year because I could not afford to pay rent. Marcus rolled his eyes. "We do not care about your sob story, Sienna. Focus on the money." I ignored him entirely, keeping my eyes locked onto my mother's face. The color was starting to drain from her cheeks. "Do you know why I destroyed my health, Claire?" I asked, shifting my gaze to my sister-in-law. "Because my father needed specialized heart medication that his insurance refused to cover. The pills cost exactly $2,000 a month. Every single month without fail, I wired exactly $2,000 directly into my mother's personal checking account so she could buy his medicine." Claire frowned, glancing between Brenda and me in sheer confusion. "What does your father's medication have to do with us?" "Everything," I replied sharply. Because 3 months into my grueling schedule, I decided to call the pharmacy directly to ask if they offered any long-term discount programs for his specific prescription. "Do you want to know what the head pharmacist told me, Marcus?" Marcus swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. He took a hesitant step backward toward the driveway. "The pharmacist told me that Thomas had not filled his prescription in 3 months." I stated, my voice echoing with cold, hard facts. "They said his account was completely inactive. So I hired a private forensic accountant to trace my wire transfers. I tracked every single penny of my hard-earned blood money." Brenda began to shake. "Sienna, stop it right now. This is private family business. Keep your mouth shut." "You never bought his medication," I said, my voice rising with righteous fury. "You watched your husband suffer. You watched his heart fail. You took the $2,000 I bled for every single month, and you funneled every last cent of it directly into Marcus's personal bank account." Claire gasped loudly, stepping away from her husband. "Marcus, what is she talking about?" "Tell her, Marcus," I demanded, pointing a rigid finger at my brother. "Tell your fake luxury wife exactly what you did with the money I sent to keep our father alive. Tell her how you managed to afford that massive, flawless diamond engagement ring on a junior bank teller's pathetic salary." Claire's jaw dropped open in absolute horror. She looked down at the massive diamond ring sitting on her left hand, suddenly looking physically sick. "That is right, Claire," I continued, striking the final devastating blow. "Your beautiful, expensive engagement ring was not purchased through Marcus's brilliant investments or his generational wealth. It was purchased with the stolen money that was supposed to keep my father's heart beating. My mother knowingly sacrificed her own husband's health so her golden boy could buy a shiny rock to impress an entitled white woman and keep up his pathetic appearances." The entire porch fell into a suffocating, paralyzing silence. The web of lies they had carefully spun for 7 years was finally unraveling right before their eyes. Claire stared at Marcus, her breathing shallow and ragged, desperately waiting for him to furiously deny my heavy accusation and quickly defend his honor. But Marcus simply stared down at the gray limestone ground in complete, miserable, and utter shame. I was completely unable to utter a single syllable in his own defense. He was now entirely exposed, and he knew it. The heavy silence on the porch stretched until it finally snapped under the weight of Claire's mounting panic. She took a trembling step toward her husband, grabbing his tailored sleeve with a frantic grip. She demanded that he speak, begging him to tell her that I was lying about the stolen medical funds and the engagement ring. Marcus jerked his arm away from her grasp with sudden, violent aggression. The miserable shame that had paralyzed him only moments before rapidly morphed into a defensive, volatile rage. He could not handle the reality of his own pathetic actions being laid bare in front of his wife, so he reverted to the only tactic he had ever used when I challenged him. He decided to use his physical size to intimidate me into silence. He thought his aggressive posture would easily force me to submit and apologize for exposing his crimes. "Shut your mouth right now, Sienna!" Marcus roared, his face contorting into an ugly sneer. He stomped heavily across the limestone patio, closing the distance between us with alarming speed. He raised his fist, veins popping in his neck as he towered over me. "You think you can just stand there and disrespect the head of this family? You are a bitter, lying snake. I am going to teach you a lesson about running your mouth and making up disgusting stories to ruin my marriage." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I simply maintained my calm posture, looking directly into his furious, bloodshot eyes, and raised my right hand. I snapped my fingers. The sharp, singular sound echoed clearly across the expansive porch. Before Marcus could even process the gesture, the heavy custom oak double doors behind me swung open. Two heavily armed private security guards stepped smoothly out of the shadows of the foyer. They were massive, imposing men dressed in tactical black suits, and they moved with terrifying coordinated precision. Their presence instantly shifted the power dynamic, completely neutralizing his pathetic attempt at physical intimidation. Within a fraction of a second, the lead guard stepped firmly between Marcus and me. He placed a massive, immovable hand squarely in the center of my brother's chest, stopping his aggressive advance completely dead in its tracks. The second guard moved to flank Marcus on his right side, resting his hand casually but deliberately near his utility belt. Marcus froze, the aggressive swagger instantly draining from his posture as he looked up at the towering security personnel. He swallowed hard, taking a slow, shaky step backward, suddenly realizing that he was no longer dealing with a helpless younger sister he could push around. "If you ever try to step toward me aggressively again, Marcus, these gentlemen will permanently remove you from my property," I stated, my voice echoing with absolute, uncompromising authority. "You are completely out of your depth here. You came to my home to demand $50,000 from me while pretending to be a highly successful investment banker. But the truth is, your entire financial empire is a massive, pathetic illusion. You do not own a lucrative investment firm at all. You run a fraudulent shell company that does not generate a single penny of actual revenue. You are nothing but a desperate con artist playing dress-up in a cheap suit." Brenda let out a sharp, offended gasp, clutching her designer handbag against her chest, as if she had been physically struck. "How dare you speak about your brother's business that way?" she yelled, attempting to regain control of the narrative. Marcus manages elite client portfolios. He works in a high-rise office building downtown. He is building generational wealth for this family, while you sit here making up terrible lies to tear him down. "He rents a shared co-working desk by the hour, mother," I corrected her, shaking my head at her blind, willful ignorance. "I know this for an absolute fact because my venture capital firm Vanguard Equities recently conducted a comprehensive deep dive background check on his supposed business operations. When my acquisitions team flagged his company name during a routine commercial real estate sweep, I decided to have my top forensic accountants pull his entire corporate filing history. What they found was truly staggering." Claire looked completely bewildered, her tear-streaked face turning pale. "What background check?" she stammered, her voice shaking violently. "Marcus, what is she talking about? You told me your company just cleared $2 million in profit last quarter. You showed me the quarterly financial statements. You promised me we were buying a vacation home in the Hamptons next month. You swore to my parents that our trust fund was doubling in size." "He showed you forged documents, Claire," I said smoothly, refusing to let Marcus speak. "My analysts traced every single transaction tied to his so-called investment firm." "Marcus, do you want to tell your wife about the massive offshore cryptocurrency scam you poured all your money into? Or should I explain how you systematically drained your corporate accounts to buy highly speculative digital coins that completely collapsed in value overnight?" Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head side to side in silent panic. He was completely trapped, pinned between my armed security guards and his wife's horrifying realization. Last month, Marcus lost exactly $1.5 million in a disastrous, unrecoverable crypto scam, I announced, making sure every single word landed with devastating impact. His business accounts are overdrawn, his credit lines are entirely maxed out, his empire is completely bankrupt. Every single lie he told to secure his status in our community was funded by debt he can no longer pay. The flashy sports car parked in my driveway is 3 months behind on lease payments. The luxury condo you both live in is facing imminent eviction proceedings. He is a fraud, and he came here today to extort $50,000 from me just to cover his immediate desperate living expenses. Brenda let out a sharp gasp, pressing her hands against her ears as if physically blocking out my words. Her fierce, unconditional protection of her golden son overrode all logic and reason. She stepped squarely in front of Marcus, shielding him from my gaze, and glared at me with a level of hatred I had never seen before. She was absolutely terrified of the truth. "You are a bold-faced liar, Sienna!" Brenda shrieked, her voice echoing off the stone walls of my estate. "My son is a brilliant financial mind. He would never involve himself in anything as reckless as cryptocurrency. You have always resented him because he built a respectable life while you ended up completely alone. You hired shady accountants to doctor these fake reports just to humiliate him on your front porch. I will not stand here and listen to you slander the man carrying this family's entire legacy." Marcus eagerly seized the lifeline our mother threw him. He wiped the heavy beads of sweat from his forehead with the back of his trembling hand and stood up a little taller. He looked directly into his mother's eyes, fully leaning into the desperate lie. "That is exactly what happened, Mom," Marcus stammered, his voice carrying a pathetic whining pitch. "Sienna has been stalking my business accounts for months. When she saw my profit, she paid professional hackers to lock me out of my own banking portals. She deliberately sabotaged my client portfolios to make it look like I lost the money. She framed me because she is bitterly jealous of everything Claire and I have built together." I did not waste a breath arguing with his ridiculous fiction. I simply reached into the pocket of my silk lounger and pulled out my personal iPad. I unlocked the screen, opened the comprehensive forensic audit file my team had finalized that very morning, and tossed the device casually onto the center of the glass patio table. The heavy tablet landed with a solid, undeniable thud. "I do not need to hire hackers to expose a man who leaves a digital paper trail as reckless and stupid as yours, Marcus," I stated, gesturing toward the glowing screen. "Go ahead, Claire. Take a close look. That is the direct, irrefutable audit trail retrieved legally from his registered business tax identification number. It shows the exact dates and times he wired your shared savings, his business loans, and his client deposits directly into an offshore cryptocurrency exchange that was raided by federal authorities last Tuesday. Scroll to page 4. You will see the finalized eviction notice for your luxury condo stamped and approved by the county court yesterday afternoon." Claire practically shoved Brenda out of the way to reach the table. Her hands shook violently as she picked up the iPad. She stared at the screen, her eyes darting rapidly as she read through the highlighted bank statements, the negative balances, and the crippling legal notices. The color completely drained from her face, leaving her looking hollow and sickly pale. The pristine, wealthy reality she thought she lived in was evaporating right before her eyes. "Marcus," Claire whispered, her voice trembling so badly she could barely form the words. She swiped to the next page with a manic, jerky motion, her breath catching in her throat. "Marcus, this official banking document says our joint savings account has a balance of negative $400. This legal notice says the bank is repossessing my Range Rover tomorrow morning. You told me you paid the lease in full for the entire year. You promised me we were flying to Paris for our anniversary next month. You even showed me the fake flight confirmation emails." "Claire, baby, listen to me," Marcus pleaded, taking a desperate step toward his wife with his hands raised. "Those numbers are completely taken out of context. The market just took a temporary dip. I have a massive deal closing next week that will cover all of this and put us right back on top. You just need to trust me." Claire dropped the iPad onto the table, the sharp clatter cutting through his pathetic excuses. The loyal, devoted wife persona she had maintained for years instantly shattered into a million pieces. The illusion of her high society lifestyle was dead, and her reaction was swift, vicious, and entirely self-serving. "Trust you!" Claire screamed at the top of her lungs, losing her polite affectation. "You want me to trust a miserable broke fraud who cannot even afford gas in my car? You have been lying to my face for months. You made me parade around my country club friends, wearing fake cheap designer bags you bought out of a car trunk. You told my wealthy parents you were a financial genius. You made me look like an absolute fool." Marcus looked like a cornered animal. "I only did it to give you the lifestyle you constantly demanded, Claire. You never stopped spending. You never stopped asking for more. Do not you dare blame this catastrophic failure on me," she shrieked, stepping right into his face. "I married a successful investment banker, not a lying scam artist. You dragged me to your sister's house to beg for $50,000, like a common street beggar. You promised me luxury and status, and instead you turned me into a public laughingstock." Claire continued to rage, her hands balled into tight fists at her sides. She turned her venomous glare toward Brenda, utterly discarding any remaining respect for her mother-in-law. "And you," Claire screamed, pointing a shaking finger directly at Brenda's chest, "you completely enabled his delusions. You sat at our dinner table praising his imaginary business deals while he was literally bankrupting us. You raised a spoiled, incredibly incompetent liar who does not even know how to be a real man." Brenda staggered backward, clutching the cold stone railing for physical support. She stood there silently, looking utterly destroyed. Marcus watched his mother crumble against the railing and his wife hyperventilate over the shattered illusion of their wealth. The weight of his humiliation finally broke his remaining composure. He could not accept that the digital ledger sitting on the glass patio table had destroyed the pristine image he had spent his adult life curating. In a desperate burst of panic, Marcus let out a guttural scream. He lunged forward, throwing his body weight toward the table. His hands outstretched like claws, he aimed directly for my iPad. His frantic mind genuinely believed that if he could just snatch the device and smash it into pieces against the limestone porch, he could erase the evidence. It was the pathetic, completely illogical reaction of a desperate, broken man. He never managed to brush his fingertips against the glass screen. The two towering private security guards stationed beside me moved with a frightening efficiency that made Marcus look like a clumsy child. The lead guard stepped forward, intercepting Marcus mid-lunge. He gripped my brother by the shoulders and forcefully redirected his momentum, slamming him face first down onto the cold stone floor. The second guard immediately dropped his knee onto Marcus's lower back, effectively pinning him to the ground. Within seconds, they had both of his arms wrenched firmly behind his back, locking him in an immovable hold. Marcus thrashed wildly, kicking his leather shoes against the limestone and grunting in frustration, but he was completely trapped. The guards applied enough pressure to keep him subdued. I did not even blink at the sudden burst of violence. I calmly walked over to the patio table, reached down, and retrieved my iPad. I tapped the screen, closing out the initial financial audit report and opening a highly encrypted folder my legal team had finalized late last night. I walked slowly over to where my brother lay, pinned against the ground, his face pressed uncomfortably against the hard stone. I crouched down gracefully, making sure my silk lounger did not brush against his dirty suit, and positioned the glowing screen just inches from his sweating, panicked face. He squeezed his eyes shut, shaking his head violently from side to side, absolutely refusing to look at the document displayed on the screen. He already knew exactly what I was about to show him on the screen. "You can close your eyes all you want, Marcus," I said, my voice sharp and penetrating. "But refusing to look at the truth will not save you from the catastrophic consequences of your actions." Claire just asked an important question, and she deserves an honest answer. She wanted to know how a broke, fraudulent investment banker managed to get his hands on $1.5 million in liquid cash to blow on a disastrous cryptocurrency scam. You did not steal that sum of money from imaginary wealthy clients. Your business accounts were completely empty before you made that catastrophic wire transfer to the offshore exchange. You needed immediate capital to fund your delusions of grandeur, and you decided to exploit the only people who trusted you implicitly. Brenda lifted her head, her tear-streaked face twisting in sudden, horrified confusion. She looked down at Marcus, her breathing shallow and erratic. I stood up, turning my attention directly to the woman who had spent my entire life enabling this absolute monster. Mother, do you remember when Marcus generously offered to review your estate planning documents last year? I asked, making sure every syllable landed with devastating impact. He told you and Dad that he needed your sensitive financial information to optimize your retirement portfolios and protect the family legacy. You handed him your social security numbers, your banking passwords, and the original deed to the house you and Dad have lived in for 30 years. You trusted your golden son completely and he betrayed you. Marcus, what did you do? Brenda whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own trembling breath. He did not optimize your retirement, Mother. I continued, my tone totally unforgiving. He took the original deed to your paid-off house and approached a predatory commercial lender. He secretly took out a massive illegal second mortgage on your family home for exactly $1.5 million. He bypassed the standard banking verification protocols by physically forging my father's signature on every single page of the commercial loan agreement. He stole the equity you and Dad spent 30 years building, and he gambled every last cent of it away on digital coins that evaporated into thin air. Claire let out a piercing, hysterical shriek, stumbling backward until she hit the brick exterior of my mansion. She covered her mouth with both hands, staring at Marcus as if he were a complete stranger. You forged your own father's signature, Claire screamed, her voice cracking with sheer terror. You committed federal loan fraud. You are going to go to federal prison, Marcus. You are going to drag me down with you. The guard shifted his weight on Marcus's back, keeping him firmly pinned as he let out a miserable, defeated sob. The reality of his impending criminal charges was finally crushing his arrogant pride. The forgery is not even the most urgent part of this specific crisis, I announced, delivering the final blow to their existence. Because Marcus lost the principal amount in the crypto scam, he has not made a single payment on that illegal second mortgage. He has been dodging the lender's phone calls and hiding the collection notices for 6 consecutive months. The commercial lender has officially run out of their patience. They filed the final default paperwork with the county clerk yesterday. Because the payments have defaulted for half a year, the bank is officially foreclosing on your home, Brenda. The sheriff will be arriving to execute the eviction protocol bright and early on Monday morning. You are officially homeless, and your precious golden son is the one who destroyed everything. Brenda stared at me, her eyes wide with a horrifying mixture of disbelief and absolute terror. The reality of my words hung heavily in the thick Georgia air, suffocating her carefully constructed illusions. Her knees finally buckled under the immense weight of the truth. She collapsed heavily onto a wrought iron patio chair, clutching her chest as she began to hyperventilate. Her breathing came in short, ragged gasps. The pristine, untouchable world she had built around her golden son was shattering into jagged pieces. She was officially homeless, and the son she had worshipped her entire life was the exact person who had pulled the trigger. Marcus remained pinned to the ground by my security guards, thrashing weakly as he let out a pathetic groan. Claire stood frozen against the brick wall, weeping uncontrollably as she mourned her fake designer lifestyle. A normal mother would have turned her righteous anger entirely upon the son who committed federal loan fraud and stole her home. A normal mother would have demanded answers, screamed at him for his betrayal, and held him fully accountable for his catastrophic actions. But Brenda was not a normal mother. Her mind had been warped by decades of toxic conditioning, deep-seated misogyny, and a desperate pathological need to uphold her status in our community. She took several deep, shuddering breaths, forcibly swallowing her panic. Then she slowly raised her head. She did not look at Marcus with disgust. Instead, she locked her eyes onto me, and her expression twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You are going to fix this right now," Brenda commanded, her voice shaking, but completely devoid of any remorse. She gripped the armrests of the patio chair, her knuckles turning white. "You are clearly a multimillionaire, Sienna. You just proved that you have millions of dollars sitting in your corporate bank accounts. You own an $8 million estate. You wear diamonds on your wrist. You are going to walk inside that massive house, pick up your checkbook, and write a check for $1.5 million today. I looked down at her, genuinely astounded by the sheer staggering magnitude of her delusion. Are you actually ordering me to pay off a fraudulent, illegal commercial loan that your son took out by forging my father's signature? I asked, my tone dripping with absolute disbelief. You want me to reward his criminal behavior by bailing him out with my hard-earned money? It is not about rewarding him, Brenda shrieked, slamming her hand down on the armrest. It is about protecting your family. It is about protecting your father. Thomas has a weak heart. Sienna, if the sheriff shows up on Monday morning and drags him out of his own home, the shock will literally kill him. Do you want your own father's death on your conscience? Marcus is the one who forged his signature and stole his equity. I reminded her sharply, refusing to accept an ounce of her misplaced guilt. If my father's health declines because of this eviction, the blood is entirely on your son's hands. You have the power to stop it, Brenda yelled, completely ignoring logic. She stood up from the chair, pointing a rigid, accusing finger directly at my face. You have the money. $1.5 million is nothing to you now. You can clear this debt with a single phone call, and yet you are standing there choosing to let your own flesh and blood face absolute ruin just to prove a petty point. You are a disgrace to our community, Sienna. I crossed my arms, maintaining a perfectly calm demeanor while she unraveled. My community? I asked smoothly. Yes, our community, Brenda roared, fully leaning into her most manipulative tactics. Do you have any idea how hard we have worked to build our reputation? We are a prominent Black family in Atlanta. We sit in the front pew of Zion Baptist Church. We command respect. If word gets out that my son committed loan fraud and lost our family home in a foreclosure, we will be a public laughingstock. The judgment, the whispers, the sheer humiliation will destroy us. As a successful Black woman, it is your absolute duty to protect your family's name. You have an obligation to uplift your brother and shield him from the systemic consequences of the real world. The absolute hypocrisy of her words was genuinely suffocating. She was actively weaponizing our race, our community standing, and her twisted version of family loyalty, just to protect a man who had stolen from his own parents. She demanded that I play the role of the magical savior, the strong Black woman expected to clean up the disastrous criminal messes left behind by the men in our family. She expected me to gladly sacrifice my own financial security to preserve a completely fake, hollow image of excellence. You want me to protect his reputation? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet volume. You want me to shield him from consequences because he is a Black man, navigating the real world. Tell me, Mother, where was this fierce protective instinct when I was out there trying to survive in that exact same world? Brenda scoffed, waving her hand dismissively as if my struggles were entirely irrelevant. Do not try to change the subject, Sienna. You obviously survived. You are standing here dripping in wealth. You clearly did not need our help to succeed, but Marcus needs your help right now. I survived completely despite you, Brenda. I stated, completely rejecting her entirely toxic narrative forever. I survived because I refused to let you and your spoiled golden son drag me down into your miserable parasitic existence today. You demand that I write a $1.5 million check to save your precious pride, but you conveniently forget exactly what it took for me to earn that exact money while you constantly babied a common thief. I let out a sharp, resonant laugh that echoed across the expansive limestone porch. It was not a laugh of amusement, but a pure, unfiltered expression of absolute disbelief at the staggering audacity standing before me. Brenda flinched at the sound, her shoulders tensing as she realized her ultimate weapon of racial guilt and community shame had completely failed to penetrate my armor. She expected me to bow my head, apologize for my success, and obediently open my checkbook to rescue the family image. Instead, I stood my ground, my posture perfectly rigid, and glared down at the woman who had spent my entire childhood treating me like a second-class citizen. You have absolutely no idea what it cost me to build the wealth you are currently demanding, I said, my voice echoing with a fierce, uncompromising clarity. 7 years ago, when you stole my college savings to buy Claire that diamond ring, I walked away from this family with exactly $42 in my checking account. I spent the first 9 months of my disappearance sleeping in the cramped back seat of a beat-up sedan. I parked behind a 24-hour grocery store, shivering through those bitter winter nights with the engine turned off because I could not afford to waste gas. I woke up at 4 in the morning every single day, just to sneak into a local community gym and take a freezing cold shower before heading to my 3 minimum wage jobs. I scrubbed toilets, I delivered food, and I saved every single penny while you sat in your comfortable house and coddled a common thief. Marcus groaned from the ground, still firmly pinned by my security guards, but I ignored his pathetic whimpering. I kept my eyes locked onto Brenda's horrified face. I built my real estate portfolio from absolute zero. I continued making sure she felt the heavy weight of every single word. I bought my first distressed property at a municipal tax auction using the tips I saved from waiting tables. I renovated that house with my own bleeding hands, working through the night until my muscles literally gave out. I flipped it, bought 2 more, and repeated the grueling process until I founded Vanguard Equities. I earned my millions through relentless, back-breaking discipline. Meanwhile, you praised Marcus for wearing a tailored suit and working in a fancy office building, completely ignoring the blatant fact that he was financing his entire fake lifestyle through debt and deceit. You nurtured a parasite, Brenda, and now you are experiencing the devastating, inevitable consequences of your own terrible parenting. Before Brenda could attempt to formulate a defense, Claire aggressively shoved herself off the brick wall. Her fear had rapidly mutated back into desperate, entitled indignation. She stomped her designer heel against the stone patio, her tear-streaked face twisting into a furious scowl. She desperately wanted to regain control of the narrative by using the exact same manipulative tactics that had always worked on her own wealthy parents. "You need to stop being so incredibly vindictive right now, Sienna," Claire yelled, waving her hands wildly in the air. "We are a family. Family unity is the most important thing in the world. You cannot just sit on a mountain of cash and watch your own flesh and blood lose their home. It is completely unnatural. If you refuse to pay off this commercial loan and let the bank throw Marcus and me out onto the street, I will personally hire a lawyer and sue you. I will sue you for severe emotional distress. I will drag your venture capital firm through a massive public relations nightmare. And I will tell every single media outlet in Atlanta that you purposely orchestrated this entire financial crisis just to ruin my life." I slowly turned my head, shifting my focus entirely away from my mother and locking my gaze onto my completely delusional sister-in-law. The sheer, unadulterated entitlement radiating from her body was truly breathtaking. She actually believed she could threaten a multimillionaire venture capitalist with a frivolous lawsuit, while her husband was actively pinned to the ground for committing federal loan fraud. I held up my right hand, abruptly cutting off her hysterical rant. "You are going to sue me for emotional distress, Claire?" I asked, a dangerous, predatory smile slowly spreading across my face. "You want to initiate a massive legal battle and open up your entire financial history to a rigorous public discovery process. Are you absolutely certain you want to invite high-powered corporate lawyers to scrutinize your personal bank accounts?" Claire crossed her arms tightly over her chest, jutting her chin out in a pathetic display of fake bravery. "Yes, I will do it. You are deliberately causing me severe psychological trauma. Let us shift the focus away from your imaginary emotional distress and talk about your luxury boutique," I stated, watching her false bravado instantly shatter. "You own a high-end women's fashion boutique in downtown Atlanta. You sell imported silk dresses, custom leather handbags, and exclusive European cosmetics. You sign a commercial lease that costs exactly $12,000 a month. You employ 3 full-time sales associates, and you constantly host lavish, catered shopping events for your wealthy country club friends." Claire blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. "My boutique is highly successful. I am an independent business owner." "Your boutique is a financial disaster, Claire," I corrected her, dismantling her illusion. My accountants pulled the tax records when they investigated Marcus. Your store has not generated a single dollar of actual profit in 3 years. You have zero organic foot traffic, and your inventory costs are astronomical. You operate at a net loss every single month. So I have a very serious question for you, Claire. How exactly did a completely broke couple manage to keep a massive, failing luxury retail store fully open for 3 consecutive years? Claire stared at me, her mouth hanging open as she desperately tried to formulate a coherent response. Her eyes darted toward her husband, silently begging him to provide a plausible explanation for her boutique's survival. She stammered about private investors, small business grants, and rotating credit lines, but her voice lacked any real conviction. She knew that no legitimate financial institution would repeatedly fund a retail business that bled money every single month. "You do not have any angel investors, Claire," I said, my voice echoing with absolute authority across the stone porch. "And you certainly did not secure any legitimate commercial loans. You were kept afloat by a steady stream of illicit cash infusions. However, those massive cash deposits did not come from Marcus's fraudulent shell company. As we have already established, his corporate accounts were empty long before he lost everything in that offshore cryptocurrency scam. So, where did the money come from?" Marcus let out a miserable guttural groan from the ground. He twisted his neck, looking up at me with sheer terror in his bloodshot eyes. He knew exactly what I was about to reveal, and the impending exposure was paralyzing him. He opened his mouth desperately, trying to formulate a plea for mercy, but the heavy hand of my private security guard pressed against his back, forcing him to remain completely silent. I shifted my gaze away from Claire and locked my eyes directly onto my mother. Brenda was clutching the armrests of her patio chair, looking thoroughly bewildered by the sudden pivot in the conversation. She had spent her adult life wrapping her identity in religious piety, using her prominent position at Zion Baptist Church to demand respect. "Mother, you have proudly served as the head treasurer for the Zion Baptist Church for the last 8 years, correct?" I asked, keeping my tone deceptively calm. Brenda blinked rapidly, completely thrown off balance by the sudden mention of her sanctuary. "Yes, I am the treasurer," she answered defensively, her voice tight with suspicion. "I manage the congregation's donations. I am a highly respected pillar of that church. Pastor Williams trusts me implicitly with the community's finances. What does my sacred duty to the church have to do with Clay?" Stated, delivering the undeniable truth. 2 years ago, Pastor Williams initiated a massive fundraising campaign for the new community center. The congregation rallied together, donating thousands of dollars every single week to the Zion Church Building Fund. You were responsible for managing those bank accounts, Brenda. You brought the ledgers home to balance the books on your personal computer. Brenda nodded slowly, her face paling, as a horrible, creeping realization began to form in her mind. "I always balanced the books perfectly," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You did," I agreed smoothly. "But you also wrote your administrative banking passwords on a sticky note and left it on your home office desk. Your golden son, the brilliant financial mind you praised, saw an incredible opportunity to fund his wife's failing lifestyle. Marcus secretly stole your administrative passwords. He logged into the Zion Church Building Fund from his laptop. Over 3 years, he systematically siphoned hundreds of thousands of dollars directly from the congregation's charitable donations. He wired the stolen funds straight into the primary vendor accounts for Claire's boutique, disguising the thefts as corporate donations." The entire porch plunged into a deafening, suffocating silence. The sheer magnitude of the betrayal hung heavily in the air, paralyzing the three antagonists. Stealing from a commercial lender was a federal crime, but stealing from the sacred building fund of a prominent black church was an unforgivable, irredeemable sin that would guarantee absolute social destruction. Brenda let out a piercing, agonizing shriek. The pious reputation she had spent decades cultivating was entirely obliterated in seconds. The community she relied on for her narcissistic supply would excommunicate her the moment they discovered the missing funds. She realized with horrifying clarity that the congregation would never believe she was innocent. They would assume she helped her son embezzle their money. "You stole from the church!" Brenda screamed at the top of her lungs, her voice cracking with sheer hysteria. She leaped up from her patio chair, her previous physical weakness vanishing under the weight of her explosive fury. She lunged toward Marcus, her fists clenched tightly at her sides. "You stole from God. You stole from my congregation. You used my administrative passwords to fund this pathetic woman's failing dress shop. You have destroyed my life." Claire was equally horrified, but her panic stemmed entirely from self-preservation. The realization that her supposed luxury lifestyle was funded by stolen charity money pushed her over the edge. She was now legally complicit in a massive federal embezzlement scheme involving a religious institution. Her privilege and country club status would not protect her from the catastrophic legal fallout of possessing stolen funds. "You told me that money was from a private venture capital group," Claire shrieked, stomping her designer heel against the limestone pavement. She turned her venomous rage entirely onto her husband. "You lied to me. You made me a criminal. I am going to go to federal prison because you are an incompetent thief. I absolutely hate you." An explosive three-way screaming match erupted on my front porch, transforming the morning into a chaotic battlefield of misplaced blame. Brenda stood over Marcus, hurling furious insults and condemning him to eternal damnation for ruining her reputation. Claire screamed hysterically, threatening to call her parents' lawyers and offering to testify against Marcus to save herself from federal prison. Marcus thrashed under the security guard's grip, screaming back at both women. He blamed Brenda for leaving the passwords out in the open, and he blamed Claire for constantly demanding expensive things he could never afford. The arrogant united front they had brought to my home was irrevocably shattered. They were tearing each other apart right before my eyes. The screaming match reached a fever pitch, a chaotic symphony of accusations echoing across my manicured lawn. But as quickly as the shouting had erupted, a horrifying realization seemed to strike Brenda with the force of a physical blow. The adrenaline that had fueled her screaming fits suddenly vanished, leaving behind nothing but pure, unadulterated terror. She stopped yelling mid-sentence, her mouth snapping shut, as her eyes widened in absolute dread. The chaotic noise on the porch faded into the background as the true gravity of the situation finally penetrated her narcissistic armor. Stealing from a commercial lender was a financial crime that could be quietly swept under the rug with enough expensive lawyers, but stealing from the Zion Church Building Fund was a completely different entity. She knew exactly what this meant. It meant inevitable federal prison time for Marcus. It meant an immediate, deeply humiliating police investigation centered directly on her tenure as the church treasurer. Most importantly to her, it meant absolute, irredeemable social ruin within the affluent Black community she had spent decades trying to impress. Her legs completely gave out beneath her. Brenda dropped heavily onto her knees, right there on the hard limestone porch, the expensive fabric of her tailored suit skirt tearing against the rough stone. She did not care about her clothes or her pristine appearance anymore. The haughty, domineering matriarch who had marched up my steps demanding obedience was completely gone, replaced by a desperate, frantic woman staring down the barrel of total social annihilation. She crawled awkwardly across the patio, closing the distance between us, until she was situated directly at my feet. She reached out with trembling, desperate hands clutching the hem of my silk lounger. I did not step back, but I looked down at her with a profound sense of disgust. "Sienna, you have to listen to me right now," Brenda sobbed, tears streaming down her face and ruining her carefully applied makeup. "You have to fix this. You have the money. You are sitting on a massive venture capital empire. You can write a check today and replace every single dollar Marcus took from the church before anyone notices the deficit. If Pastor Williams audits those building fund accounts and sees the missing money, our entire family will be destroyed. The congregation will demand a full police investigation. They will put my son in a federal penitentiary and they will drag my name through the mud." I stared down at her, absolutely astounded by the sheer selfishness of her plea. "You want me to secretly replace hundreds of thousands of stolen dollars so you can pretend your golden boy is not a common criminal?" I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low and steady. Brenda tightened her grip on my clothing, looking up at me with wild, pleading eyes. She immediately pivoted to the only tactic she thought could break my resolve: intense, suffocating religious manipulation. "Proverbs tells us that a brother is born for a time of adversity. Brenda cried out, her voice cracking with hysterical desperation. The Lord has blessed you with this immense wealth for this exact moment, Sienna. He placed you in this position of power so you could act as the ultimate savior for your family. You cannot turn your back on us when we are standing in the valley of the shadow of death. You must show grace and mercy. If you do not write that check to the church today, you are actively defying the will of God. I gently but firmly peeled her trembling fingers off my silk lounger, taking a deliberate step back to establish a physical boundary. Do not dare quote scripture to me to justify your son's embezzlement, Brenda, I replied, my tone cutting through her frantic religious performance. God did not tell Marcus to steal donation money to buy his wife counterfeit designer shoes, and God certainly did not command me to bankrupt my own company to cover up your staggering incompetence as a church treasurer. You are using religion to shield a thief from the consequences of his own terrible choices. Seeing that her religious guilt trip had completely failed, Brenda switched to her final emotional weapon. She knew my relationship with my father Thomas had been complicated but lacked the pure animosity I felt toward her. She weaponized his fragile health without hesitation. If you will not do it for Marcus, then you must do it for your father, Brenda wailed, pounding her fists against the limestone floor in a dramatic display of anguish. You know how sick Thomas has been. His heart is incredibly weak. He has spent 30 years building his reputation as a respected elder in that congregation. If the police show up at our front door to arrest his only son for stealing from the church, the sheer magnitude of the shame will literally kill him. His heart will just stop, Sienna. Do you want to be the reason your own father dies of a massive heart attack? Do you want to stand at his funeral knowing you had the power to save him and you chose to hold on to your money instead? You have the resources to make this entire nightmare disappear right now. You are choosing to be cruel. Please, I am begging you on my hands and knees, just wire the funds to the church account so we can go back to being a respectable family. I looked at the woman kneeling on the ground. She was entirely willing to sacrifice my hard-earned money and financial security just to preserve her fake pious reputation in a community built on appearances. She did not care about the ethics of the situation or the working-class families who donated their savings to the church building fund. She only cared about maintaining the illusion of her perfect family. I took one final look at her display and shook my head, refusing to be manipulated by toxic tears. I remained entirely unbothered as Brenda continued to weep on the cold limestone patio. My demeanor was ice-cold, completely unaffected by the theatrical display of religious guilt she projected. I looked down at the woman who had birthed me, the woman currently kneeling at my feet, not to seek forgiveness, but to demand financial sacrifice. She waited for me to break. She expected the obedient daughter she had raised to resurface, cave to community shame, and blindly write a check. She wanted me to quietly absorb the massive deficit Marcus created. You think shedding tears and quoting scripture will magically absolve you of your complicity? I asked, my voice slicing through her dramatic sobs. You think I am going to blindly hand over my hard-earned wealth to cover up a federal crime just so you can walk into Zion Baptist Church on Sunday and pretend you are a righteous treasurer? You have severely miscalculated my boundaries, Brenda. However, you will be very interested to know that I actually already stepped in to deal with the church financial crisis. Brenda gasped, her head snapping up so fast her expensive hat nearly tumbled off. Her tears instantly stopped flowing. A sudden sickening glimmer of profound hope flashed across her dark eyes. She let out a massive shuddering breath, genuinely believing she had finally broken me down. She reached out her hands again, a relieved, triumphant smile breaking through her ruined makeup. Marcus also stopped struggling under the heavy grip of my security guards, turning his bruised face toward me with sheer anticipation. Even Claire stopped her frantic pacing, her eyes widening as she waited for the ultimate financial bailout. You paid the money back? Brenda asked, her voice trembling with sudden overwhelming relief. Oh, Sienna, I knew you would not let our family fall into ruin. I knew the Lord would speak to your heart. You wired the missing funds to the building account. You covered the stolen money. I did not wire a single penny to cover up your son's criminal embezzlement. I corrected her, instantly shattering her short-lived relief. I did not replace the money Marcus stole because doing so would make me legally complicit in your cover-up. But I did step in to handle the broader financial disaster you and your son created for that congregation. I just handled it in a way you are going to absolutely hate. Brenda lowered her hands, the false hope draining from her face as rapidly as it had appeared. What are you talking about? What did you do? When my forensic accounting team traced the stolen funds flowing into Claire's failing boutique, they pulled the public financial records for Zion Baptist Church to verify the origin of the accounts. I explained, maintaining a terrifyingly calm tone. My analyst discovered the church was bleeding money. Pastor Williams had taken out a massive commercial development loan to fund the new community center. As the head treasurer, you were completely responsible for managing those loan payments. But because Marcus aggressively drained the cash reserves to buy Claire fake designer bags, the church repeatedly defaulted on their commercial mortgage. The lending institution placed Zion Baptist Church in active pre-bankruptcy status. Brenda covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a muffled, horrified whimper. She knew the congregation was completely unaware of the impending bankruptcy. The bank was preparing to foreclose on the church property by the end of the month, I stated, making sure the devastating reality echoed across the porch. So I decided to intervene. I utilized the capital resources of Vanguard Equities. Last Thursday morning, my venture capital firm bought out the church's outstanding commercial debt from their original lending institution. We paid off the massive default in full, saving Zion Baptist Church from an immediate catastrophic foreclosure. Marcus let out a miserable groan from the ground. As a former banking professional, he knew exactly what acquiring commercial debt meant in the corporate world. He understood the immense, terrifying power I now held over the entire institution. "Do you understand what that means, Mother?" I asked, taking a deliberate step closer to where she knelt. "It means my venture capital firm is now the sole financial overseer and the absolute legal creditor of the entire Zion Church development project. Pastor Williams and the church board of directors no longer answer to their previous commercial bank. They answer directly to Vanguard Equities. They answer to me." Claire shook her head in sheer disbelief, her hands gripping her blonde hair. She was unable to process the staggering level of financial dominance I had just revealed. I was not just a successful businesswoman. I was the ultimate authority, holding the fate of their entire community in my hands. As the new primary legal creditor of their commercial development loan, my firm required absolute unrestricted access to the church's internal financial records. I continued, twisting the metaphorical knife with precision. It is a standard corporate requirement when acquiring distressed institutional debt. Pastor Williams gladly handed over the master administrative rights to the church banking portals because he was incredibly grateful. Vanguard Equities stepped in to save his congregation from ruin. He gave my forensic accounting department full clearance to review every single transaction made during your tenure as the head treasurer. Brenda let out a terrible wail, collapsing forward until her forehead rested against the cold limestone patio. She was utterly defeated. "I have the complete fraudulent ledger, Brenda," I announced, my voice ringing out like an unappealable verdict. My team downloaded every digital receipt. I have seen the exact timestamps of every illicit transfer Marcus initiated. I have seen the corresponding deposit records hitting Claire's retail vendor accounts. I possess the ironclad proof of your collective federal crimes. I hold the power to dismantle your entire fake life, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop me from exposing the truth. Marcus stopped struggling against the heavy grip of the security guards. The fight drained out of his muscles for a fleeting second as the catastrophic weight of my words processed in his arrogant brain. He realized the ultimate safety net he relied on was gone. Brenda could not protect him. She could not sweep a federal financial crime under the church rug or silence the congregation because I now controlled the ground the church was built upon. He was entirely trapped, backed into a legal corner with absolutely no way out. The realization did not bring him to a place of remorse. Instead, it ignited a raw explosion of pure panic. Marcus violently twisted his torso, shoving his elbows backward in a desperate attempt to break free from the two massive men holding him down. He kicked his leather shoes against the stones, scuffing the polished material, as he let out a guttural roar that sounded more animal than human. His face contorted into an ugly mask of absolute fury, his eyes bulging wildly as he glared up at me. I was completely losing his mind right there on my front porch. "You set me up!" Marcus screamed, spit flying from his lips as he thrashed helplessly. "You planned this entire thing from the beginning, Sienna. You bought that commercial debt just to trap me. You orchestrated this whole setup because you have always been obsessed with destroying my life." I stared down at his pathetic display, my expression completely unchanged. He was trying to frame his calculated embezzlement scheme as my personal vendetta against him. "I did not force you to steal your mother's banking passwords, Marcus," I replied calmly. "I did not force you to wire hundreds of thousands of dollars of church charity money into your wife's failing boutique. You made those criminal choices completely on your own. I simply bought a distressed corporate asset. You handed me the loaded gun." Marcus refused to accept accountability. His bruised ego demanded a scapegoat. "You are a manipulative sociopath." "Sociopath," he shrieked, his voice echoing loudly. "You hacked my private accounts and ruined my crypto investments, so I would lose everything. You want to see me in a federal prison because you cannot stand the fact that Mom and Dad always loved me more than they ever loved you." Brenda covered her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably as her son unraveled completely. Claire backed further into the brick wall, watching her husband transform into a raving lunatic. "I am going to destroy you for this," Marcus roared, his neck veins protruding as he directed his violent rage entirely at me. "You think you are untouchable because you have money and a couple of hired thugs. I am going to take everything away from you, Sienna. I swear to God. I will come back here when you least expect it. I will burn this massive mansion straight to the ground. I will strike a match and watch your entire $8 million empire burn into a pile of worthless ash, and I will laugh while you lose everything you ever worked for." Before I could even respond to his absolute madness, Marcus continued his deranged tirade, fully incriminating himself. "You cannot do this to me," he spat wildly, kicking his legs. "You are just a bitter woman. You are going to pay for humiliating my wife in front of our mother. I will make sure you suffer for the rest of your miserable life." The two private security guards immediately tightened their grips on his shoulders, pressing him harder into the limestone patio. The lead guard reached toward his tactical belt, preparing to fully restrain Marcus with zip ties. I raised my right hand, slightly extending 2 fingers in a silent command. The guards instantly paused, holding Marcus securely, but refraining from escalating the restraint. I wanted him to keep talking. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, looking down at his sweating face. "Are you quite finished detailing your elaborate arson fantasy, Marcus?" I asked, my voice carrying a smooth, terrifyingly pleasant tone. Marcus panted heavily, glaring at me with sheer, unfiltered hatred. I did not break eye contact as I slowly raised my left arm and pointed a single finger upward toward the intricate crown molding that lined the ceiling of the expansive porch. "Before you decide to scream any more violent threats on my property, I highly suggest you take a very close look at the perimeter of this porch," I instructed smoothly. Marcus blinked, his eyes darting upward despite his raging anger. Nestled discreetly in the corners of the custom stonework were 4 state-of-the-art high-definition security cameras. Their tiny blue indicator lights blinked steadily in the morning shade. "This is a $9 million estate located in one of the most exclusive, heavily monitored neighborhoods in Buckhead," I explained, letting the cold reality wash over him. "Those are commercial-grade 4,000-pixel security cameras. They do not just capture crystal-clear video. They are equipped with highly sensitive directional audio recording microphones. They have been capturing every single second of your chaotic visit today." The remaining fight instantly drained out of Marcus's body. His eyes widened in absolute paralyzing horror as he stared at the blinking blue lights above him. "You just spent the last 3 minutes screaming at the top of your lungs that you are going to burn my property to the ground," I said, delivering the final crushing blow. "You actively threatened to commit arson and destroy my home because you are angry that I possess the financial evidence of your corporate theft. I want you to understand exactly what you just accomplished, Marcus. You just provided the federal authorities with a pristine high-definition audio and video confession of your violent intentions. You just added federal extortion, terroristic threats, and premeditated conspiracy to commit arson directly to your impending laundry list of wire fraud and embezzlement charges. Claire stared at the blinking blue lights of the security cameras tucked discreetly into the custom crown molding of my expansive porch. The horrifying reality of her immediate legal peril finally crashed down upon her. She was standing on the property of a multimillionaire fully recorded, while her husband was pinned to the limestone ground having just confessed to extortion and federal loan fraud. But the most terrifying detail echoing in her mind was my revelation about the Zion Baptist Church. Claire knew that federal prosecutors did not offer lenient plea deals to individuals who embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from charitable religious organizations. She was staring down the barrel of a lengthy federal prison sentence. The sheer instinct for self-preservation kicked in instantly, overriding any remaining loyalty she held for her husband. Claire took a sharp breath, stepping completely away from where Marcus lay struggling against my private security guards. She looked at him, not with the concern of a devoted wife, but with the calculated disgust of a cornered animal. Instantly, her entire demeanor shifted. She forced her chest to heave, conjuring a stream of heavy, frantic tears that cascaded down her cheeks and ruined her expensive makeup. "Sienna, you have to believe me," Claire cried out, her voice trembling. "I had absolutely no idea what Marcus was doing behind closed doors. I swear to you on my own life. I am completely innocent in all of this. He is a highly controlling, financially abusive husband. He handles every single aspect of our personal and business finances, because he told me I was too incompetent to understand high-level accounting. When he wired those massive deposits into my boutique vendor accounts, he explicitly told me the money was coming from a private group of angel investors." Claire took another step backward, distancing herself further from the man pinned to the patio. "I never once looked at the routing numbers, Sienna. I never recognized the name of the church on those bank transfers because he deliberately hid the administrative ledgers from me. He manipulated me, just like he manipulated your mother." Claire turned her venomous gaze down toward Marcus. "You are a monster, Marcus," she screamed, pointing an accusing finger at his bruised face. "You lied to me every single day of our marriage. You made me complicit in a federal crime against a church. I am calling my family lawyers. I am filing for divorce immediately, and I will gladly testify against you in federal court to prove my complete innocence." I stood perfectly still on my porch watching her frantic, desperate performance. Claire genuinely believed that if she cried hard enough and threw her husband under the bus fast enough, I would actually pity her and exclude her from the impending legal destruction. She thought her tears would somehow erase her active participation in draining a community building fund. I reached into the deep pocket of my silk lounger and withdrew a perfectly folded stack of crisp white papers. I did not need to rely on digital screens for this specific confrontation. I wanted Claire to see the physical, undeniable proof of her own malicious greed. I slowly unfolded the papers, smoothing out the creases. "Your performance is truly Oscar-worthy, Claire," I stated, my voice slicing effortlessly through her hysterical sobbing. "You almost convinced me that you were just a helpless, financially illiterate victim. However, my forensic accounting team does not deal in emotions or tears. They deal in absolute, irrefutable digital footprints. When Pastor Williams granted Vanguard Equities unrestricted administrative access to the church banking portals, my analysts also pulled the corresponding corporate email communications tied directly to your boutique merchant accounts." The fake, desperate tears instantly stopped flowing from Claire's eyes. Her entire body went completely rigid. The color drained from her face. She knew exactly what was printed on the papers in my hand. "I am holding a certified printed transcript of your private corporate email correspondence with your husband," I announced, holding up the first page so she could clearly see the official header. "Let us read an email dated October 14th of last year. You wrote, 'Marcus, my supplier in Milan, is demanding $40,000 for the new spring collection of Italian silk dresses. Just log in with your mother's passwords tonight and divert the funds to my secondary vendor account before she notices. Label it as a structural repair expense.'" I flipped to the second page, making sure my voice carried across the silent, sprawling estate. Or perhaps we should look at this lovely email from just 2 months ago. You explicitly instructed him, do not use the main Zion Baptist routing number for this transfer. Bounce it through the secondary community outreach account first, then wire it to my boutique. The auditors are less likely to flag a split transfer. I lowered the stack of papers and looked directly into Claire's utterly horrified eyes. You did not think the money came from angel investors, Claire. You explicitly orchestrated the entire money laundering process. You actively directed Marcus on exactly how to siphon the donations, which specific church accounts to drain, and how to hide the illicit transfers from the congregation auditors. You eagerly spent it on luxury inventory you could never organically afford. The absolute, undeniable proof of her federal crimes hung heavily in the humid morning air. Claire's innocent, victimized facade was permanently and legally destroyed in front of everyone. Marcus let out a harsh laugh from the ground, finding a sick sense of satisfaction in watching his treacherous wife go down with him. Brenda remained paralyzed on her knees, completely unable to comprehend the sheer, calculated evil standing right in front of her. Claire stumbled backward, realizing there was no escape. She was a complicit, documented co-conspirator in a massive federal embezzlement ring. Silence was broken by an approaching engine. Through the wrought iron gates, an Uber pulled up. My father, Thomas, stepped out onto the pristine pavement. He looked disheveled, contrasting his normally composed appearance. Breathing heavily, his eyes darted around the property as he rushed toward the locked barrier. He gripped the iron bars, peering at the chaotic scene unfolding on the limestone porch. "Sienna!" Thomas called out, his voice cracking with profound confusion and sheer panic. "Sienna, open these gates. What is going on here?" I maintained my perfectly calm demeanor. I raised my hand, nodding to the security guard nearest to the control panel. He pressed the release button, and the pedestrian side gate clicked open. Thomas did not wait for an invitation. He pushed through and sprinted up the driveway, his chest heaving as he reached the porch. He had rushed over after receiving a highly alarming text message from his wife. As Thomas reached the top step, he froze completely. The scene laid out before him was a catastrophic tableau of family destruction. He saw Marcus pinned to the floor by a security guard, his expensive suit covered in dirt. He saw Claire slumped against the brick exterior, sobbing hysterically with ruined makeup. Finally, his eyes landed directly on his wife. Brenda was crumpled on her knees, the fabric of her tailored suit torn, looking utterly pathetic in the heat. "Thomas!" Brenda shrieked the moment she saw her husband. His arrival injected a desperate surge of adrenaline into her veins. She scrambled up from the floor, stumbling awkwardly as she launched herself toward him. She grabbed his arm, digging her manicured fingernails into his jacket sleeve to seize control. "Thomas, thank God you are finally here to stop this madness," Brenda cried out, forcing fresh tears to flood her eyes. "You have to stop her. Sienna has completely lost her mind today. I sent you that frantic text message because she trapped us behind these gates and refused to let us leave. She hired these terrifying thugs to assault our innocent son. She threw Marcus to the ground for absolutely no reason at all." Thomas looked completely bewildered. He stared at Marcus, who was panting heavily under the security guard's knee, and then shifted his gaze back to his frantic wife. "Brenda, why is Marcus on the ground?" Thomas demanded, his voice shaking with fear. "Why did you text me that our entire family was being permanently destroyed? What did you do?" "We did not do anything wrong," Brenda screamed, her voice reaching a shrill, piercing pitch that hurt my ears. She pointed a furious, trembling finger directly at my face. "It is your wicked daughter Sienna is trying to frame Marcus for a massive financial crime. She is insanely jealous of his outstanding success and his beautiful marriage to Claire. She fabricated all these completely fake banking documents to make it look like Marcus stole money from the Zion Baptist Church. She is trying to convince everyone that Marcus embezzled community charity funds just to ruin our good name in the neighborhood." Brenda squeezed Thomas's arm tighter, pouring out her desperate, calculated lies. She genuinely believed that if she screamed loud enough and played the victim hard enough, Thomas would blindly defend her and their golden son, just like he had always done. "She is going to call the police and show them these fake documents, Thomas," Brenda wailed, burying her face in his shoulder. She wants to send our boy to a federal prison out of pure vindictive spite. You have to make her stop right now. Tell her to call off her security guards and give us those forged papers so we can burn them. Tell her to give us the money to save our home from foreclosure. She is trying to leave us homeless. Thomas. Thomas stood perfectly still, letting his wife sob frantically into his jacket. He did not immediately wrap his arms around her to provide comfort. He did not turn to me and begin shouting demands. Instead, a heavy, deeply conflicted expression settled across his aging face. He gently but firmly peeled Brenda's trembling hands off his arm, physically separating himself from her frantic, manipulative embrace. For decades, Thomas had chosen the absolute path of least resistance. He had passively allowed Brenda to run the household with an iron fist, turning a blind eye while she spoiled Marcus and systematically neglected my needs. He had always taken the easy way out, accepting Brenda's polished, superficial version of reality because challenging her required too much emotional energy. But standing on this luxurious porch, observing the catastrophic fallout of their toxic parenting, denial was no longer a viable option. He looked at Claire, who was refusing to make eye contact with him, shrinking further back into the shadows of the brick wall to hide her overwhelming shame. He looked at Marcus, who could not even muster the courage to deny the terrible accusations his mother was screaming. Finally, Thomas slowly turned his head and locked his tired, searching eyes directly onto my face. He did not see a bitter, jealous daughter trying to tear down her successful brother. He saw a confident, highly successful woman standing firmly in her own power, holding a thick stack of certified financial documents. He saw the cold, unyielding truth reflecting in my steady gaze. Thomas took a deep, shuddering breath, the weight of his profound parental failure crashing down upon his shoulders. He knew with absolute certainty that Brenda was lying. He knew that the golden son he had permitted to be coddled had finally committed an unforgivable sin against their own community. "Sienna," Thomas said, his voice dropping to a remarkably quiet, defeated whisper. He ignored his wife's continued hysterical rambling entirely. He took a hesitant step toward me, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. "Sienna, please tell me the exact truth right now. What did your brother actually do to our family?" I held my father's searching gaze and refused to match the frantic energy vibrating from my mother. Brenda was still clinging to his jacket sleeve, sobbing loudly and begging him to shut me down, but I could see the profound doubt fracturing his usual passive compliance. Thomas had spent his entire adult life taking the path of least resistance, blindly trusting his wife to manage the household and their finances. But the undeniable presence of my armed security guards and Marcus pinned to the limestone patio shattered his comfortable denial. I did not raise my voice. I slowly reached down to the glass patio table, picked up my iPad, and took 2 deliberate steps toward my father. I bypassed Brenda entirely, ignoring her frantic attempts to step between us, and held the glowing screen out to him. "I am not going to scream at you, Dad," I said, my voice carrying an absolute authority that commanded his full attention. "I am simply going to show you the undeniable certified financial records my forensic accountants finalized this morning. What you are about to see is going to completely devastate you, but you need to look at it closely because ignoring the truth is no longer an option." Thomas swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly as he took the heavy tablet from my grasp. He adjusted his reading glasses, his brow furrowing as he looked at the first document. "Swipe to the right, Dad," I instructed smoothly. "That first page is the finalized eviction notice for Marcus and Claire's luxury condominium. Marcus does not own a successful investment firm. He runs a completely bankrupt shell company. Last month, he lost his entire corporate savings in a disastrous offshore cryptocurrency scam. He is entirely broke, and he came to my property today to aggressively demand $50,000 from me just to cover his immediate living expenses." Thomas let out a sharp, confused breath. He looked down at his golden son, who was actively refusing to make eye contact. "Marcus, is this true?" Thomas asked, his voice cracking with shock. "You lost everything. You came here to extort your sister for cash." Marcus squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a miserable groan from the floor, but he remained completely silent. His inability to defend himself was all the confirmation Thomas needed. "Keep swiping, Dad." I pushed forward, refusing to give him a second to recover. Because losing his own money is the least of his crimes. Look at the next document. Look at the signatures. Thomas swiped the screen, his eyes scanning the dense legal jargon of a commercial loan agreement. Suddenly his breathing stopped completely. His face turned an ashen, sickly gray. He pulled the iPad closer to his face, staring at the bottom of the document in sheer horror. "That is a second mortgage on your family home, Dad," I stated, delivering the crushing blow with surgical precision. "Marcus secretly took the original deed to your house. He went to a predatory commercial lender and took out a massive loan for exactly $1.5 million. He bypassed the standard banking security verification protocols by physically forging your signature on every single page of that agreement. He stole the equity you spent 30 years building, and he gambled it all away on digital coins. Because he has not made a single payment in 6 months, the bank is officially foreclosing on your house on Monday morning." "No," Thomas whispered, his voice trembling so violently it barely registered. "No, this cannot be real. My signature, he forged my name." Brenda let out a terrible wail, burying her face in her hands. "There is one more file, Dad," I said, my tone completely unforgiving. "Look at the final document. Look at the Zion Church Building Fund." Thomas swiped one last time, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped the tablet. He stared at the administrative banking ledgers, his eyes darting across the highlighted illicit wire transfers. The realization hit him like a physical freight train. He was a deeply religious man, a respected elder in that congregation for decades. Seeing the undeniable proof that his own flesh and blood had systematically drained the community charity donations to fund Claire's failing luxury boutique was the ultimate unforgivable betrayal. The heavy iPad slipped from Thomas's hands, clattering loudly onto the limestone patio. He slowly turned his head, looking down at his only son. The passive, accommodating father I had known my entire life completely vanished in that exact second. A sudden, terrifying wave of absolute clarity and explosive rage washed over his aging features. Thomas took 2 rapid steps forward, completely ignoring the private security guards. He reached down, grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his expensive dirty suit jacket, and hauled him halfway off the ground. Marcus gasped, his eyes wide with sheer panic as he stared into his father's furious face. "Dad, I am sorry," Marcus shrieked, his voice pitching into a pathetic whine. "I was going to pay it all back." Thomas did not say a single word. He pulled his right arm back and slapped his son directly across the face with staggering, violent force. The sharp, explosive crack of the impact echoed across the sprawling estate. Marcus cried out in pain, his head whipping to the side as he collapsed back onto the hard stone floor. He curled into a miserable ball, sobbing loudly. Thomas stood over him, his chest heaving with extreme exertion. The illusion of his perfect family was completely obliterated. He slowly turned around, fixing his furious, broken gaze squarely onto his wife. Brenda was kneeling on the cold ground, covering her trembling mouth in paralyzing shock. "You did this!" Thomas growled, his voice vibrating with disgust that cut straight through the air. "You protected him from every consequence, enabled his arrogance, and belittled our daughter, just to make him superior. You created a monster." "Brenda, I am filing for divorce today. You disgust me." Brenda stared at her husband, the words hanging in the heavy Georgia air like a death sentence. The man who had silently stood by her side for over 30 years, the man whose signature had been forged by their golden child, had just shattered her entire reality. For a brief, agonizing moment, Brenda could not process the magnitude of her husband's declaration. Then the shock violently mutated into pure, unadulterated hysteria. Her face contorted into a mask of absolute rage, her eyes bulging wildly as she snapped her head toward me. She needed a scapegoat for her catastrophic failure, and I was the only target left standing. "You are a demon!" Brenda shrieked, scrambling up from the limestone patio. Her voice tore through the humid morning air, harsh and frantic. "You are an absolute monster, Sienna. You orchestrated this entire nightmare just to destroy us. We had a perfect, respectable life before you decided to show up and ruin everything. You poisoned my husband against me. You manipulated Thomas into leaving me, and you set up your own brother to fail. You have always been a wicked, jealous girl who could not stand to see anyone else happy." She lunged forward, her hands curled into claws, but my private security guards instantly stepped between us. The lead guard raised a massive hand signaling her to back away. Brenda hit the invisible wall of their authority, bouncing back and stumbling over her own torn skirt. She pointed a trembling finger around my sprawling, immaculate estate, her chest heaving with manic, desperate breaths. "You think you can buy your way into a clear conscience," Brenda wailed, tears of pure fury streaming down her ruined face. "You think having a $9 million mansion makes you better than the family that raised you. You are tearing this family apart, piece by piece. You ruined our perfect lives today, Sienna. You ruined everything." I did not flinch at her hysterical accusations. I did not raise my voice to match her frantic, desperate energy. I simply stood there perfectly poised in my silk lounger and looked at the woman who had spent my entire existence treating me like a disposable asset. "I did not ruin anything," I said smoothly, my voice carrying a quiet, terrifying authority that immediately commanded the space. "You and your golden son ruined your own lives through unparalleled greed and staggering incompetence. I am simply the one delivering the final receipt for your actions." Brenda let out a bitter, mocking laugh, trying to regain some semblance of her matriarchal control. "A receipt?" She spat, her voice shaking violently. "You think you can just stand there and lecture me about receipts? You owe this family everything you have. You owe Marcus. You owe me. I am still your mother, and you are going to fix this massive disaster right now." I slowly reached my right hand into the deep pocket of my silk lounger. My movements were deliberate and unbothered by her ongoing meltdown. I retrieved a single envelope made of heavy cream-colored paper. It did not look like a printed email or a digital audit report. It looked incredibly formal, carrying the distinct, undeniable weight of a certified legal document. I held the envelope out toward my mother. My security guards parted slightly, creating a clear, unobstructed path between us. Brenda stared at the thick paper, her chest heaving, completely terrified of what it might contain. She slowly reached out her trembling hand, snatching the envelope from my grasp as if it were a venomous snake. "What is this?" Brenda demanded, her voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "What other fake documents did you print out to torture me?" "Open it and read it aloud to the group, Brenda," I instructed coldly. "I want Marcus to hear exactly what his brilliant financial decisions have accomplished for his beloved parents." Brenda fumbled with the heavy seal, her manicured fingernails tearing at the thick paper. She pulled out a stack of crisp, officially stamped legal documents. Her eyes darted to the bold, capitalized letters printed across the very top of the first page. The color completely drained from her face. Her knees visibly buckled, and she let out a sharp, horrifying gasp, as if all the oxygen had been violently sucked from her lungs. When the commercial lender officially filed the final default paperwork with the county clerk yesterday afternoon, they immediately moved to auction off the distressed asset to recover their losses. I explained, making sure my voice reached every single corner of the porch. "They listed the second mortgage of your property on a private commercial exchange. My venture capital firm Vanguard Equities monitors those exact exchanges for highly lucrative real estate acquisitions. I saw the listing pop up, and I instantly recognized the address. So I authorized my acquisitions team to purchase the bad debt." Thomas looked up, his eyes widening in shock. "Sienna, what did you do?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I bought the mortgage to your foreclosed house from the bank, Dad," I stated, delivering the ultimate mind-blowing payoff. "I paid off the entire $1.5 million debt in cash yesterday evening. The commercial bank no longer owns the deed to your home. I do. I am the sole absolute legal owner of the house you have lived in for the last 30 years. Brenda stared at the stamped document in her shaking hands, unable to fully process the catastrophic reality slowly unfolding before her. "That document you are holding is not a fake printout, Mother." I continued, twisting the metaphorical knife with surgical precision. "It is a formal, legally binding county-stamped eviction notice. You, Thomas, and Marcus have exactly 48 hours to pack up your personal belongings and vacate the premises entirely. If you are not gone by Monday morning, I will send the county sheriff to physically remove you and throw all of your furniture onto the street." Brenda stared at the eviction notice, the harsh black ink blurring as her hands shook uncontrollably. The reality of losing her home, the ultimate symbol of her carefully curated social status, finally broke her. She did not scream this time. Instead, she let out a hollow, defeated gasp, her knees giving out completely as she sank back onto the limestone patio. Thomas did not reach down to help her up. He simply looked at the woman he had been married to for over 30 years, his expression devoid of any remaining affection or sympathy. He stepped away from her, physically distancing himself from the wreckage of their toxic marriage. Claire remained pressed against the brick exterior of the mansion, her mascara-stained face buried in her hands, desperately trying to calculate how quickly she could file her divorce papers. Then a faint, high-pitched wail pierced the heavy, humid Atlanta air. At first, it was just a distant hum echoing through the affluent Buckhead neighborhood. But within seconds, the sound multiplied and grew significantly louder. The unmistakable overlapping shrieks of multiple sirens cut through the quiet morning, steadily approaching the sprawling estate. The noise snapped Marcus out of his miserable, defeated stupor. He twisted his head toward the imposing wrought iron gates, his eyes wide with a fresh, paralyzing wave of sheer terror. He recognized that sound. It was not the casual, slow approach of a neighborhood patrol car. It was the aggressive, high-speed approach of multiple law enforcement vehicles responding to a major active incident. Marcus knew exactly what those sirens meant. His fraudulent empire had collapsed, his secret crypto losses were exposed, and he had just spent the last 10 minutes threatening arson on a heavily recorded porch. The primal instinct for self-preservation kicked into overdrive. He let out a desperate guttural yell and violently thrust his elbows backward, catching the secondary security guard off guard for just a fraction of a second. Marcus scrambled to his feet, his expensive leather shoes slipping frantically against the smooth limestone patio. He did not run toward his mother or his wife. He did not ask for help. He bolted straight toward the manicured, sprawling front lawn, desperately hoping to find a blind spot in the fencing or a section of the perimeter wall he could somehow scale to escape his inevitable fate. I did not even make it 10 yards across the grass. The lead security guard, a man who possessed the speed and precision of a former military operative, moved with terrifying efficiency. He vaulted off the edge of the limestone porch, sprinting across the vibrant green grass. In 3 massive strides, he closed the distance between them. The guard lunged forward, wrapping his thick, muscular arms directly around Marcus's waist. He tackled my brother with devastating force, driving him hard into the manicured turf. Marcus let out a sharp cry as the breath was violently knocked out of his lungs. The second guard arrived a second later, grabbing Marcus's flailing arms and forcefully twisting them behind his back. They pinned him face down into the dirt, effectively neutralizing his pathetic escape attempt. "Let me go!" Marcus screamed, spitting grass and dirt from his mouth as he thrashed uselessly against the heavy weight of the 2 men holding him down. "You cannot hold me here. Let me go right now." I walked slowly to the edge of the porch, looking down at the miserable, writhing man who had spent my entire childhood treating me like a disposable peasant. I did not raise my voice. I casually lifted my left arm, pulling back the silk sleeve of my lounger to check the time on my diamond-encrusted Rolex. The hands on the luxury watch indicated that everything was proceeding exactly on schedule. The trap I had set was finally springing shut. "They are not going to let you go, Marcus," I announced, my voice carrying a smooth, terrifyingly calm authority. "And you are certainly not going anywhere. I highly suggest you stop fighting my security team and save whatever energy you have left, because you are going to need it for the booking process." Brenda looked up from the patio, her tear-streaked face twisting in renewed horror. "Sienna, what did you do?" she sobbed, clutching the eviction notice against her chest. "Did you call the local police on your own brother? Are you having him arrested for a domestic disturbance? I will pay for his bail. You cannot send him to a local jail." "I did not call the police for a simple domestic disturbance, Mother," I corrected her, shaking my head at her persistent, naive delusions. "A local county jail is the absolute least of his impending problems. When Marcus stood on my porch exactly 1 hour ago and aggressively demanded I hand over $50,000 to cover his fraudulent debts, I immediately sent a silent distress signal directly from my phone. I contacted the federal authorities. They have been listening to everything. Claire gasped loudly, her hands flying to her mouth as the true severity of the situation finally registered in her panicked brain. The sirens you hear are not neighborhood patrol officers responding to a family argument, I explained, watching the blood completely drain from my mother's face. I forwarded the entire unredacted forensic audit file, the forged commercial mortgage documents, and the Zion Church Building Fund ledgers directly to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. I gave them unrestricted access to the digital money laundering trail, linking Marcus's empty shell company to Claire's failing luxury boutique. The authorities rapidly reviewed the catastrophic evidence of his federal loan fraud and religious embezzlement. They secured emergency expedited arrest warrants from a federal judge. The deafening roar of the sirens reached a blistering crescendo. The flashing red and blue lights violently reflected off the towering oak trees lining my long circular driveway. Through the massive wrought iron gates, 3 heavy police cruisers arrived outside. The heavy wrought iron gates of my Buckhead estate did not stand a chance against the sheer authority of the federal government. I pressed the main release button on my remote control, and the massive metal barriers swung inward. 3 dark, unmarked federal SUVs and 2 local Atlanta police cruisers surged up the long circular driveway. They parked at sharp, aggressive angles, completely boxing in Claire's unpaid luxury vehicle. The doors flew open simultaneously. A highly coordinated team of federal agents wearing tactical vests emblazoned with the FBI logo swarmed the pristine limestone patio. They moved with a terrifying absolute precision that instantly suffocated any remaining shred of defiance on the porch. The sheer overwhelming presence of federal law enforcement transformed my quiet morning property into a chaotic, inescapable crime scene. My private security guards immediately stepped back, relinquishing their physical hold on Marcus as the federal agents took over. 2 imposing agents hauled my brother off the manicured grass. They dragged him roughly to his feet, spinning him around and slamming him chest first against the brick exterior of my mansion. Marcus let out a high-pitched, miserable wail. His expensive tailored suit was stained with dark Georgia clay, and his face was slick with sweat and tears. He looked absolutely nothing like the arrogant, highly successful investment banker who had confidently marched up my steps to extort $50,000 just 1 hour ago. He was nothing but a broken, pathetic fraud facing the catastrophic consequences of his own greed. Marcus Vance, the lead federal agent, announced, his voice booming with cold administrative authority. He pulled a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his tactical belt. You are under arrest for multiple counts of federal wire fraud, commercial loan fraud, and the embezzlement of charitable funds. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking tightly around my brother's wrists echoed loudly across the patio. Marcus thrashed his shoulders desperately, trying to twist his head to look at his mother. "Mom, please do something," Marcus sobbed, his voice cracking with sheer, unadulterated terror. "Call the church lawyers. Tell them I will pay the money back. I am a good person. I just made a mistake. Please do not let them put me in a federal prison." The agents ignored his pathetic, frantic pleading entirely. They began aggressively searching his pockets, confiscating his phone and his wallet. While Marcus was being thoroughly searched, 2 female federal agents turned their sharp, uncompromising attention directly toward Claire. Claire had been pressing herself flat against the brick wall, hyperventilating as she watched her husband get chained like a common criminal. When she saw the agents advancing toward her, her survival instincts kicked into overdrive. She immediately attempted to weaponize her tears and her inherent white privilege, fully expecting the authorities to treat her with gentle deference. She straightened her posture, wiped the smeared mascara from her cheeks, and pointed a trembling finger at Marcus. "Officers, you need to listen to me right now," Claire demanded, her voice shrill and dripping with absolute staggering entitlement. "I am the victim here. My husband is a manipulative, financially abusive monster. He controlled all of our bank accounts, and he completely lied to me about where the money for my luxury boutique came from. I come from a very prominent, wealthy family in this city. My father is a highly respected corporate attorney. You cannot possibly arrest me. I have absolutely nothing to do with his disgusting church embezzlement scheme," The female agent did not even blink at Claire's frantic, privileged performance. She reached into her tactical vest and pulled out a second pair of steel handcuffs. Claire Vance, you are officially under arrest for federal conspiracy to commit wire fraud and the active laundering of stolen charitable funds, the agent stated, stepping directly into Claire's personal space. We have obtained the certified transcripts of your corporate email correspondence. We have the exact digital records showing you actively instructing your husband on how to funnel stolen church donations through your boutique vendor accounts. Turn around and place your hands behind your back right now. Claire's eyes widened in absolute paralyzing horror. The protective shield of her wealthy background had completely failed her. The federal government did not care about her country club status or her father's legal connections. When the agent grabbed her arm, Claire completely lost her mind. She started kicking her expensive counterfeit heels against the limestone, screaming and violently resisting arrest. "Get your hands off me!" Claire shrieked at the top of her lungs, thrashing her body from side to side. "You cannot do this to me. I am innocent. Sienna set us up. She is a vindictive, jealous liar. Let me go right now." The two agents forcefully spun Claire around, slamming her shoulder against the brick wall just inches away from her sobbing husband. They wrestled her flailing arms behind her back, forcefully clicking the heavy steel cuffs onto her wrists. Claire wailed hysterically, the illusion of her high society lifestyle permanently shattered in front of everyone. Brenda could not handle the horrifying reality playing out on my front porch. She scrambled across the stone patio on her hands and knees, completely disregarding the torn fabric of her tailored suit. She lunged toward the lead federal agent, grabbing his tactical vest with desperate, frantic fingers. "Please, officer, I am begging you to show mercy," Brenda cried out, her voice raw and hoarse. "I am the head treasurer of Zion Baptist Church. We are a highly respectable, prominent family in this community. My son is a good boy. He just lost his way. You cannot take him away like this. The shame will completely destroy our entire congregation." The agent firmly peeled her trembling hands off his thick uniform. He looked at her with pure disgust. Thomas silently accepted the truth. The lead federal agent turned his back on my mother, signaling to his heavily armed team that the perimeter was completely secure. The thick doors of the dark federal SUVs slammed shut in rapid metallic succession, a harsh sequence that permanently sealed my brother and sister-in-law inside their new reality. Marcus pressed his bruised, tear-stained face against the heavily tinted glass of the back window. His eyes were wide with an unimaginable, suffocating terror as the crushing weight of his impending federal prison sentence finally broke his arrogant spirit. Claire sat slumped in a separate vehicle, her head bowed between her knees in absolute, undeniable disgrace, her counterfeit designer shoes scuffed and ruined by the dirt. The powerful engines roared to life, and the convoy of law enforcement vehicles slowly rolled down my pristine circular driveway. The flashing red and blue lights painted the towering oak trees in chaotic, frantic strokes of color before the cars finally turned out of my wrought iron gates and disappeared down the affluent street. The heavy metal gates automatically swung shut behind them, locking with a resounding, definitive click. The distant wail of the sirens gradually faded into nothingness, leaving my sprawling estate bathed in a sudden, profound, and heavy silence. Thomas remained standing near the edge of the limestone porch. He did not run down the driveway after the police cruisers. He did not reach out his hands to comfort the weeping, broken woman kneeling on the ground beside him. My father simply watched the flashing lights vanish into the distance, his shoulders slumped under the immense, crushing weight of his monumental parental failure. For 3 long decades, he had chosen the absolute path of least resistance. He had passively allowed my mother to nurture a greedy monster while systematically neglecting my existence and dismissing my potential. Now the catastrophic bill for his chronic silence had finally come due. He slowly turned his head, pulling his gaze away from the empty driveway, and looked directly into my eyes. His expression was deeply bloodshot, filled with a raw, agonizing mixture of grief and profound clarity. He took a hesitant, trembling step forward, stopping just a few feet away from where I stood perfectly poised in my silk lounger. "I am so incredibly sorry, Sienna," Thomas said, his voice carrying a raspy, broken quality that I had never heard from him before. I stood by blindly and watched Brenda tear you down. I let her spoil your brother until he genuinely believed the entire world owed him everything he demanded. I foolishly thought that keeping the peace in our house was somehow more important than protecting my own brilliant daughter. I was a weak, accommodating man, and my cowardly silence created this exact nightmare. I looked at my father, studying the deep, exhausted lines etched into his aging face by years of marital submission. I did not feel an overwhelming surge of immediate forgiveness, but I did recognize his genuine, unfiltered remorse. He was the only person who had arrived at my home today seeking the actual truth, rather than aggressively demanding my hard-earned money. I reached into the deep pocket of my lounger and pulled out a small silver keyring holding two simple brass keys. I held them out toward him, letting the cool metal catch the bright morning sunlight. "I am not going to offer you a place in this mansion, Dad," I stated, my voice steady and completely devoid of any lingering malice. "I have spent the last 7 years building a life composed entirely of peace, and I absolutely refuse to bring the chaotic, toxic remnants of my childhood into my personal sanctuary. However, I do own a modest 2-bedroom condominium in the downtown district. It is fully paid off, completely furnished, and currently vacant. You can live there rent-free for the rest of your life. You can use it to rebuild your peace, heal your heart, and figure out your next steps in life." Thomas stared at the keys resting in my open palm, his chest heaving with a sudden, overwhelming wave of profound gratitude. But before he could reach out his trembling fingers to take them, I closed my hand tightly around the metal. "There is one absolute non-negotiable condition," I warned him, my tone shifting into a sharp, commanding edge that demanded absolute compliance. "If you take these keys, you will follow through with filing your official divorce papers tomorrow morning. You will completely cut off Marcus, and you will never allow Brenda to step foot inside that property. If I ever find out that you gave her a single dime of support or let her cross your threshold, I will legally evict you on the exact same day, and I will never speak to you again. You have to choose your peace over her toxicity right now." Thomas did not even hesitate for a single second. He looked down at his wife, who was still crumpled miserably on the patio, and then looked back at me with absolute certainty. "I am done with her, Sienna," Thomas promised, his voice finding a new solid strength. "I am completely done with the lies, the fake church status, and the endless manipulation. I accept your terms." I opened my hand and he took the keys. He offered me a small, respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement of the powerful woman I had become, before turning his back on Brenda forever. He walked down the limestone steps, heading straight for the Uber that had waited faithfully by the gates. He climbed into the back seat and the car drove away, leaving Brenda completely abandoned on the curb of my estate. Brenda was now entirely alone. The domineering matriarch who had marched up my steps demanding obedience was stripped of her golden child, her loyal husband, her sacred church status, and her stolen wealth. She slowly pushed herself up from the hard stone floor, her tailored navy suit ruined and covered in dirt. She looked at me, her face pale and trembling with a horrifying absolute desperation. "Sienna, please," Brenda whimpered, extending a shaking hand toward me. "You cannot leave me like this. Where am I supposed to go? I have absolutely nothing left." "You have a formal eviction notice, Brenda," I replied, my voice echoing with a cold, unrelenting finality. "You have exactly 48 hours to pack your counterfeit shoes, your empty designer bags, and your fake religious piety into a cardboard box. When the county sheriff arrives on Monday morning to physically remove you from the house I now own, I suggest you do not cause a scene." Brenda opened her mouth to unleash another frantic plea, but I was already done listening. I turned my back on the woman who had spent my entire life trying to break my spirit. I walked smoothly across the pristine porch, the soft fabric of my silk lounger trailing elegantly behind me. I stepped through the grand entryway of my $9 million mansion, feeling the cool, refreshing air conditioning wash over my skin. I grabbed the heavy, custom brass handles of the massive mahogany double doors. I did not look back at the pathetic, ruined woman weeping on my patio. I pulled the doors shut, the heavy wood closing with a solid, echoing thud that resonated through the grand foyer. The locking mechanism engaged with a sharp, definitive click, permanently sealing out the toxicity, the manipulation, and the greed forever. I stood alone in the absolute breathtaking silence of my beautiful home, taking a long, deep breath of pure freedom. Justice was finally absolute.